Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Celestina Akinkunmi, and I have here with me today my colleagues, Reka Gadia, Jyoti Agnihotri, and Amira Abed. Reka is our Family Services Department Manager, Jyoti is Language Training and Childcare, and Amira is our Outreach Coordinator. Today, we'll be sharing with you several approaches used in the organization to support the settlement and integration of newcomer women and their families. In this presentation, I will share with you our HLP project. Jyoti will be speaking on literacy and technology. Reka will talk to us about gender-based violence and occupational health and safety. And Amira will walk us through our outreach approach during this pandemic. But first, the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kayanai, Piikani, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, Chiniki, Bespo, and Wesley, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. A few housekeeping rules. You're welcome to ask your questions throughout the presentations, but we'll only be taking questions at the end. You can also find the entire presentation on the P2P virtual platforms. Please feel free to post your questions on the chat and we'll take them at the end. So first, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CIWA. CIWA is a non-profit organization that was established in 1982 as a registered charity. CIWA is a culturally diverse settlement agency that recognizes, responds to, and focuses on the unique concerns and needs of immigrants, refugee women, girls, and their families. CIWA's uniqueness is based on its gender-specific mandate, and over the years, we have continually responded to the emerging needs of immigrant women and girls and developed innovative programs, established meaningful partnerships, and have come to be recognized as a provincial and national leader in outcome-based gender-specific settlement services. We offer programs and services in the areas of settlement and integration, literacy and language training, employment support and bridging programs, family violence, parenting, individual counseling, in-home support, civic engagement, health, housing, and community development. Clients have access to childcare and first language support in all ramifications of our service provision. Now to my presentation. The Health Literacy Partnership Project arises from an increasing need for improved integration between low literacy refugees and newcomers and healthcare providers. The project was created based on a brief literature review, recent focus groups, and previous research that was conducted by CIWA, which revealed that refugees and newcomers face varied barriers to accessing healthcare services, including language and interpretation, isolation, transportation, cultural, gender, and poverty-related barriers. The barriers that refugees and newcomers face to accessing healthcare services, including structural and institutional access, navigation, financial, which is poverty, transportation, misinformation about costs, personal, which includes isolation, fear or mistrust of doctors and institutions, and cultural barriers. Personal beliefs about healthcare and safety cannot be overemphasized. While literacy instructors often provide a wide array of learning opportunities about health and health services, professionals who are health service providers provide outreach and presentation opportunities. There are still significant gaps in addressing the healthcare access and care of refugees and newcomers. Healthcare professionals also struggle with patients missing appointments or not adhering at all to treatment plans. The project does not only work to address the health literacy and related competencies of adult literacy learners, but also works towards increasing the capacity of organizations and systems to bridge the gap that is present even now when it comes to accessing services by newcomers with limited language skills. Now let's take a look at what health literacy is and why it matters. Health literacy is the ability to access, understand, evaluate, and communicate and act on health information and services, and it involves a wide variety of skills. It's all about the ability of people to act on information in order to live healthier lives. Health literacy then has far-ranging implications, and the current global health pandemic, COVID-19, just brings this into even sharper focus, showing us the crucial importance of accessing reliable health information to make decisions that affect the health of individuals and their families and our communities. It is clear from research that limited health literacy is an important health issue. Adults with limited health literacy are less likely to seek health information and healthcare services, less able to manage chronic health conditions due to their lack of understanding and self-management requirements. They experience poorer health outcomes. They are more likely to experience miscommunications with their healthcare providers. It is a serious and costly problem that is likely to grow as the population ages and chronic disease rates increase. Improving health literacy. Literacy is not simply a matter of a person's individual skills. It also depends on the complexity of the healthcare system and skills of health professionals to communicate in ways that people understand. And more, we're understanding that health literacy is a multilingual set of practices. It just doesn't happen in English. And it involves people using support networks of other people who help them make decisions about their health and get things done in the health setting. So improving health literacy requires a broad intersectoral approach, one that involves increasing the knowledge of the people who are receiving healthcare and supporting the people and systems that are providing healthcare to reduce the barriers and literacy demands of the system. So knowing what we know about the importance of health literacy, the negative impacts of low health literacy, and the path to improve health literacy, we knew that we needed to do something. So we created a robust partnership with the MOSAIC Refugee Health Clinic. And the reason was because MOSAIC Refugee Health Clinic worked with our target population, and we knew they would be able to provide valuable insight to the project. We knew we really had to listen to the voices of marginalized people who are new to the health system, new to English, and new to literacy. We needed to hear from healthcare professionals who work with these same patients, and this was achieved through our partnership with MOSAIC. We also needed to hear from the education professionals who teach newcomers in the language and in literacy classrooms every single day. So who did we hear from? We gathered 3 groups of participants, and we set about making questions and, more importantly, listening. We talked to 32 healthcare professionals from the MOSAIC Refugee Health Clinic, 17 ESL practitioners, and we listened to them through focus groups, surveys, class visits, and shared learning experiences. Most importantly, we listened to the ESL or literacy learners. We held 5 focus groups in 31 languages and provided interpretation in 9 languages, all with women who are registered in the CIWA's beginning level ESL literacy programs called Pebbles in the Sand, which you will hear a little bit more from Jyoti later in the presentation. Overall, we impacted 75 ESL literacy learners through class visits, tours of health facilities, and piloting all of the tools. We learned so much by listening to our participants. It was unbelievable. We learned from our healthcare professionals at MOSAIC that even though they're already going through the extra miles to meet the needs of their patients, they still had a strong desire to understand their patients better and to have more strategies to be able to communicate with them. We learned from the literacy professionals who not only teach health-related topics in the classroom, but provide extra support such as explaining voicemail messages to their clients from doctors' offices, helping learners understand information in letters or documents that they bring to the classroom. And even still, these literacy professionals had a strong desire to do more for their clients, for their learners. They asked for more resources, navigational information that they can mediate with their learners, especially materials that are designed specifically for adult literacy learners, including resources with videos or photos. And then we went to the learners. We learned from them that everything they are doing, that they could possibly do, they are doing. They value the care that they receive, but they want to be able to access services better. They're just not able to do it alone. They know they need more English skills. They need more help from families or other support systems to get things done in the healthcare system, such as understanding and keeping track of information, booking an interpreter, knowing what medications they are on, avoiding missed appointment, and remembering what steps they need to take before and after their next appointments. So having listened to the expertise of these 3 participant groups, our partnership team set about developing resources to address the identified needs. We took our drafts back to our participant groups multiple times for feedback, and as a result, we created customized resources that can help bridge the gaps that we had identified. We then created a web page to store all the resources so they are easily accessible by anyone. That's what you have on your screen. From this web page, the videos and personal tools can be accessed, and they are housed under the resource tab, which is very easy to navigate. On the resource page, you will find 3 personal tools that can help people access and keep track of information. One of them is the Health Passport, which is a little passport size booklet for people to fill out and keep with them. It can be filled out at home or in a clinic and kept with the patient for safekeeping. It was created to help support health communication between literacy learners and healthcare professionals. It keeps all their personal information organized and in one place and easily accessible. For any literacy learner, they can fill this out with the help of their support network at home or in the classroom. Inside the booklet, you'll be able to find their emergency contact, their doctor's name and clinic, underlying health condition, and any medication they are likely on. My language card helps to address the language barrier that was identified as a challenge by all participant groups. This card is designed for literacy learners to keep in their wallets. It shows the learner's name, what language or languages they prefer to speak in, and it tells you to help them find an interpreter. Learners can practice with it in the classroom, keep it with them in their daily life when they're accessing services. Next Step Notepad is a tool for healthcare clinics to help their patients understand and remember what to do next in which order. There are 3 lines where healthcare professionals can write down the next steps the patient should take. Then the page is ripped off, the pad is given to the patient so they can take it home, show it to their support network who can also help them with identifying what they need to do next. On the back of the page, there are tips for healthcare professionals to remember, such as making sure to write the steps in the correct order. Literacy professionals can use the Next Step notepads to have learners practicing managing information and multi-step processes. We produced a downloadable guide for literacy professionals, and it contains 6 chapters, each one corresponding with one of the healthcare access videos. And each chapter includes health literacy concepts, vocabulary, and teaching tips, and suggested lesson activities that incorporate the use of the language card, health passport, and Next Step notepad. Each chapter also contains a whole suite of photocopiable learner activity pages designed for beginning literacy learners, using tasks and activities suggested to us from our literacy professionals. There's also a downloadable pack of high-quality, full-colored photos taken directly from the videos because our participants told us how valuable and good clear visuals are for teaching them. So the healthcare access videos, that they actually introduce people to the process of accessing healthcare services. The videos are the centerpiece of our resources, so that's the whole bone of the entire website being created. And it's been designed to be used both in the educational setting as well as in the healthcare setting. The videos are available in 7 languages: Arabic, Farsi, Hindi, Mandarin, Spanish, Tigrinya, and Urdu. Each video follows a fictional patient going through the steps in accessing health services, including going to the doctor, getting a mammogram, getting blood work at the lab, and getting a checkup and cleaning at the dentist, as well as going to the eye doctor and visiting the pharmacy. We wrote the videos in a narrative style because we know the power of storytelling. The videos tell short, culturally appropriate stories. They move at a slow, gentle pace. They use short sentences and plain language. They model how patients interact with healthcare professionals, asking questions, asking for help and clarification, using a support person at appointments, and being confident consumers of the healthcare system. We really took advantage of the partnership model in developing these stories and videos. We got feedback on the scripts from our healthcare partners and our literacy professionals and made necessary changes. We tested the stories and videos with our learners and teachers to ensure that we hear what they thought and to make changes based on their feedback. The Teacher's Guidebook. Now, if you remember, our literacy professionals had asked for more navigational information and resources to help them incorporate health literacy in their classrooms. So this page of the website includes a whole suite of teaching tools. It includes the Teacher's Guidebook that contains ready-to-use materials, as well as the storybooks and worksheets that accompany each video. The videos have activities that include storybooks and worksheets in language that tell the basic stories of the video and follow the best practices and guidelines for materials developed for adults who are willing and learning to read. They show only a limited amount of text. They contain the same clear, full-colored photos taken from the videos. The pages are clean, uncultured, and the text is written in a large sans serif font. The corresponding worksheets have the same still images in the storybooks and in the same order. They do not contain any written text. They are simply blank lines under each photo, which your clients can practice writing. And teachers can use them with multi-level classes. So while some learners can write one word to go with a picture, others might be able to write a phrase or a sentence. For healthcare professionals, we developed a guide for clinics. Healthcare professionals had a strong desire to understand and communicate with their patients, especially with adults who are new to literacy and new to English. So our partnership teams search for successful communication strategies that are used in language and literacy education classes for adults, and we compile them in these two resources. The first tool is the Guidebook of Communication Strategies, which is a small booklet that you can download and print in front of you or your staff that you can use for yourself or your staff. And the second tool is a larger poster outlining the same communication strategies and can be posted at the wall of any clinic. The Guidebook for Health Professionals, as mentioned, contains 6 main strategies, which addresses language barriers, makes oral communication clear, make reading communication clear, make processes clear, encourage support network, and try to build the client towards independence. The communication strategies chart, as you can see in front of you, is a legal size chart. It's a quick reference guide. It just highlights the 6 strategies that are previously mentioned that are in the guidebook. And it just gives helpful tips and reminders. You just need to look up if you have it in front of you, and you can see how best to help with clients. So that is a look at the resources and website that was developed in this project. The tools and resources are not specific to the city of Calgary and can be utilized in any space across Canada or globally. Anyone can access the tools online, download them, use them in any virtual classroom, which is what everybody is doing now. I mean, it's all remote now. People can benefit from watching the videos and understanding healthcare navigations without leaving the comfort and safety of their homes. They were designed to work for people at the very beginning stage of literacy and language proficiency. I encourage you to use these tools wherever possible, share it with people who you believe will benefit from them. And there are many people who will find these resources useful. We've sent them out to foundation learner programs, learner schools. We've sent them to hospitals, facilities that have aging Canadians or newcomers, just as you see fit. It can be applicable to all. I'll just share a few participant testimonials that we've received from the healthcare professionals we heard. They said, thank you for these resources. They're incredible and invaluable. And they're a great resource to increase the capacity to independently navigate the healthcare system. This was the testimonial we got from a literacy practitioner, that the videos and the resources are well done, and she can see many organizations using them. From an ESL literacy learner, she said before, maybe 3 to 4 years ago, the doctor had asked for a mammogram. She didn't understand. The first time she went there, she didn't know what she was doing. She was looking and waiting. When it was her turn, she didn't know what to say. She got scared. But using the tool and being able, if she had seen the video before now, then she'd be able to understand everything and she would not have been scared. And that's the end of my presentation. I thank you for taking the time to listen. I encourage you to go on and check the video out on the website. All the tools are they're there for you to download. If you would like them sent out to you, you can just fill out a requisition form with your name, your agency. It's very easy form to fill out, and we can have them shipped out to you. Once again, our entire presentation will be available on the P2P virtual platform for you to download. And any questions that you ask at this time, we will not be able to take them, or we'll be taking them at the end of the video. I would now like to call on my colleague, Jyoti, to start with her presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning and good afternoon, based on which province you are joining from, and to all those who took time to attend the P2P presentation today. My name is Jyoti Agnihotri, and I'm the manager of Language Training and Childcare Department at Calgary Immigrant Women's Association. I'm here today to talk about one of the programs called as the Pebbles in the Sand program, and how they managed to transition to virtual learning, give you some tips of how we have accomplished all that we did, share some of the implementations that didn't work, and offer my support to any educators or organizations that are also chugging along our virtual education year. So we have titled it Literacy and Technology, Overcoming the Barriers for Foundation Literacy Learners. So what is Pebbles in the Sand program? Pebbles in the Sand program was initiated in 1999 as a low literacy ESL teaching program funded by Calgary Learns and Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada. meaning we develop and teach immigrant women who have 7 years of education or less in their home country. They come to us with benchmarks or foundations, 1 literacy or 2 literacy in reading and writing, and anywhere from 3 benchmark to 6 in their listening and speaking. A lot of foundational learners must rely on their listening and speaking on a daily basis, which makes it very hard to identify their low literacy without a Canadian language benchmark assessment. So our program does require that to confirm the students' needs. So at Pebbles, we focus mainly on their reading and writing skills as a bridge for them to eventually join LINC or other ESL language or job training programs. Many of these women are illiterate in their first language. Some have no experience even holding a pencil, and it should go without saying that they have no technological literacy. I would like to start by explaining what definition of a foundational learner is, as well as give you a brief idea of the hurdles the immigrant women we have in this program have to get over every day. As defined by CALP, or Community Adult Learning Program, from which a lot of our professional development is derived from here in Alberta, a foundational learner is an adult who chooses to engage in foundational learning opportunities such as literacy, numeracy skills for learning, basic digital skills, and or English language learning to address the knowledge gaps. Now, these learners will also probably be facing other socio-economic or financial barriers that further challenge their learning journey. Our pandemic journey started last year in March, and soon we realized that the world's situation might be more dire than first thought. We came up with the 4Cs strategy to teach Pebbles literacy students virtually: connect, consistent, compliant, and compassion. The first C is so important, and we figured out that women who already had multiple barriers started showing signs of disconnect as soon as we switched our classes online. Any way, shape, or form, we had to reconnect with these women, be it by phone call, letter, email, text message, video chat, smoke signal, or carrier pigeon. And that was the hardest step. Once these women heard a familiar voice or saw a familiar face, it accomplished step number 1 to recreating the connection that we lost when our classrooms were closed. The remaining 3 C's were obviously related to the first C, and once we established methods to connect with them online, we followed the remaining 3: consistent, compliant, compassion. I would like to talk in detail about these 4 C's now. Connect. An overwhelming amount of pictures and symbols have been chosen to purposely make this slide look ridiculous. As we worked through our break to come up with an appropriate, cost-effective, simplified teaching plan, Pebbles facilitators were inundated with new technology themselves. Teams, Zoom, Google Classroom, WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram, Duo, FaceTime, Skype, text messages, phone calls, headsets, laptops, and tablets. By the end of the break, I think we internally all looked like the women in this picture. And it really was a special moment as a team when we ourselves were surrounded by kids running around the house and dogs barking to be let outside, that we realized that if we were overwhelmed and facing screen exhaustion, imagine what it's going to look like for the students. So we started slow, made simple phone calls, using students' family members, volunteers, fellow facilitators who spoke more than one language, and made this as comfortable an experience for the students as possible. For those who did not have access to smartphone or computers, CIWA provided a laptop. We were fortunate enough to receive funding and support from an internet provider to get internet to the students who needed it. Teachers also learned what apps the students knew and then taught themselves how to use them so as not to bring too much new technology into the classroom too quickly. Which leads us into next C, consistent. Being consistent to us meant a gradual, eased, and familiar lesson strategy. Once we had established that connection, we were able to build on it from just simple phone calls to video chatting and Zoom classes. We kept the students with the same teacher, called them at the same time every day, tried to follow a similar schedule, to the one that they knew from class and use tools and materials familiar to them. A typical class pre-COVID started with reading a story one-on-one with the teacher. Then they worked on the calendar, weather, and attendance as a class. After they would do a literacy task, a numeracy task, and some form of a worksheet or writing in their notebook. After a lot of consistent connections, teachers were able to recreate those lessons and structures within a virtual environment by providing those familiar materials and tools to what they had in class pre-COVID. We either mailed or delivered all the things they were used to seeing in class, like pencil, eraser, notebooks, worksheets, binders, etc. Compliant. This all sounds so good on paper, but the practicalities of maintaining a virtual classroom were definitely difficult, and that leads us to this third C, which is compliant. Being compliant or flexible was the forgiveness that we needed to give ourselves. It means that things don't go always as planned. Maintaining a schedule during a pandemic is about as fun as it sounds. Teachers combated this by extending homework deadlines, taking screen breaks, and reiterating time and again that a crying baby, a child needing a snack, or someone ringing at the front door is no big deal. We tried to recreate a classroom as best we could, but at the end of the day, we are all human beings. Learning English is important, but it shouldn't be adding to the stress already imposed on all of us by the pandemic. Teachers had to ensure that the students knew that this virtual classroom was still the safe space they remember from the real classroom. The facilitators needed to create not only a plan A, but needed a plan B, C, or Z. And after being compliant or flexible, gave them that room to try things in class they never would or had before. An example that I would like to share with all of you came from one of the teachers, and she explains, and in her own words, it goes like this. She says, last summer I was teaching food words to my students. The videos I had found on YouTube were confusing. The link to the lesson was not working. The worksheet I had sent to the students turned out blurry. And I could tell what the students were feeling. They were feeling burned out. So I spent a week sitting in front of my fridge to visually show what I was talking about. When trying to explain words like cucumber, tomato, zucchini, with a whiteboard to spell the words and a pair of gloves to keep my hands warm, it ended up being one of the most fun weeks, as gradually every day more students parked their chairs in front of their own fridges to show what they had learned. And because we were able to laugh as a class at the absurd direction our virtual classroom took. The final C is compassion. We found that this word is the easiest to give to others and the hardest to show ourselves. ESL teachers are by nature people. They love people and they get an instant high over seeing students succeed. They are hands on. Teachers have to be big personalities to match the big exaggerated gestures and pronunciations they need to do to pass on information and knowledge to their students. They rely on touch, smell, taste, sight, and hearing to get their message across. COVID made it feel like we had lost the first three of these five teaching senses. There were a lot of external and internal fears being faced by both our students and teachers, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. To combat that, we included many implementations, but the two that stand out most to us are family literacy activities and non-teaching moments. Family literacy activities were lessons that the families could do together since we could not do them in tangible classroom situations. For example, during an Indigenous Studies lesson about making a traditional food item, the students videotaped themselves with their families making and eating benok together. Or during Christmas, teachers send our students out to do their own twinkle tour by looking at Christmas lights and sending a picture of their favorite display to the classroom group chat. Non-teaching moments are where the students just get to sit in the Zoom meeting or group video chat and chat. Sometimes they show their teachers their children or their paintings. They talk in their own language or English, it really doesn't matter. We get a tour of their living room or see pictures of family members from back home. I think these are the moments that may not help them definitely with their language goals, but they most certainly helped keep us all sane in an insane situation. I look back to what Pebbles in the Sand program looks like before COVID. We are successful. We had a good intake and graduation rate, knowledgeable teachers, a strong support network, and many locations within the city for students to access our services and training. It wasn't easy, but despite the pandemic, most of these things have not changed us all. We had students graduate from our program during the pandemic, and we have still made ourselves accessible throughout the city. We have had to be creative with continuing classroom intake as the immigration numbers, especially the refugee numbers, have significantly decreased during COVID. However, our students really enjoyed the change to a virtual classroom because they feel safe from the pandemic and still get to have that social interaction on a daily basis. And word of mouth from our students has been a huge help in maintaining our new student intake and attendance numbers. Blending literacy students with technology to make them technologically literate had originally felt beyond what Pebbles in the Sand did, could, or would provide. However, following the 4 C's of connect, consistent, compliant, and compassion, we have given literacy students a personal, practical, and possible approach to virtual learning. I hope that you will all be able to take something away from it, whether it is for learners or for yourself. And if you ever want to discuss in more details the tools and resources we use, or to connect, to access more information about CIWA or teaching ESL, please feel free to contact me. My contact details are shown on this slide. So I'll end my part here. I want to thank everybody who actually made these slides possible, and that includes all the Pebbles in the Sand facilitators, SMT, and all other students who actually participated in this conference slide that we were making. And I would like to thank you so much for having me here today. And I hope to connect with you, some of you soon. Please send your questions if you have any in the Q&A session below, and we will be able to answer those questions towards the end of this whole presentation. And right now, I would like to pass on this mic to Rekha, who is the Family Services Department Manager. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jyoti. And now I will be talking about the intersectionality of gender-based violence and occupational health and safety. And this is from the immigrant and women's perspective. So this is through a project that we had a research project that we did here at CIWA, which is the Employment Security Alliance for Vulnerable Immigrant Women. And it was a 3-year project that we had a research project to help identify the systemic barriers preventing women from fleeing domestic violence and also from entering and remaining in the workplace, and ensure that they have the community and economic support to break free from the cycle of violence. The other objective of this project was to create institutional change to increase the economic security of immigrant and refugee women who are fleeing domestic violence. And the third objective of this project that we did was to establish and foster a sustainable alliance of employers, immigrant serving agencies, women's organizations, communities agencies, and the immigrant women who are dedicated to supporting the economic security for those fleeing violence. And as you can see on the slide, there were 2 things that we were particularly focusing on. One is the economic security and one is the employability, because we wanted to be very clear from the get-go, like, you know, how are they interconnected? So we started off with the notion that, or with the clarity that economic security includes probable continued solvency predictability of future cash flow, the employment or job security. And these are adaptable to women's needs and expectations. And this is exactly what the government of Canada defines economic security as. The other notion that we started off the employability clarity was being physically, emotionally, intellectually, and physically, psychologically be able to work. Just being present at work does not mean that you are employed, but it are the factors that are also contributing to you being employed are all of these equally important. Having the skills and tools to get and maintain employment and personal and social environment, as well as the aspects of women's life which affect her work. And, employers can support the employability if they are aware of all the obstacles that these employees are facing. So this is the notion that we kind of started with. And in the process, what we have identified is there are 4 components that we started with. So deconstructing the barriers. So one from the women's lens, one from the immigrants' lens, and the others from the domestic violence lens, and there is from the newcomer lens. So again, it's the one person, but if you put different lenses to that same, you will see different kind of barriers, and that will help you really assess the challenges that these individuals are facing. So if you look from a women's perspective, so from that lens, so the biggest one was the defined gender role, regardless of what culture you're coming from and the deep-rooted patriarchy you take in. And pandemic has proven to us over and over right now that, women have that defined gender role, and they are confined within those gender roles. Childcare was a huge issue that came up. And then I will speak later how we came up with this and what was the methodology used. So, and then the pandemic effect, as we are all hearing in the news, seeing that. So the shadow pandemic, women are really being a part of the shadow pandemic for multiple reasons. Then there is the fear of, being judged because of their gender role. And there are multiple aspects also within the fear. Shame was a huge one as well for women that we were looking at or we were engaging in the project with. Then if you look at the barriers from the immigrant standpoint, so of course the cultural barriers, language barriers, those are very common one that we come across. Then there is stigma because the culture comes with different kind of beliefs and values, and of course the community pressure. So the stigmas associated with those beliefs and traditions, cultures, values, all of those. And of course, different levels of education, somewhere coming with a low literacy type of profile, some came with the professional education, so that was another way of looking at it. And of course discrimination, racism, and those things were also stemming from the barriers when we were assessing the overall theme here. So if you look at the same from the newcomer and the lens of violence, so if you take the newcomer lens, they were similar to the immigrant, but within the immigrant also, if they are newcomer, that makes it even more difficult. So barriers are even higher. So the newcomer is basically they are very new to the country. And they may not have work experience, and that may even add more to the complexity. They don't have the proper information to navigate the system, or the they don't have the information regarding the supports they may have available for violence, dealing with the violence issue or employment issue for that matter. Then they have a lack of, the family or friends, they have that lack of community support. Then as we mentioned earlier that, there is the shame and the fear. It's always, particularly when the newcomer is there, they always don't want to be judged because of who they are, what their skin color is, and what their thoughts and values. They don't want to access the mainstream services just because they might be feeling that they will be judged. So, and now if you look at the same person with the lens of violence, they may be going through different kinds of violence. So It's not just the physical violence, but it could be financial, it could be spiritual, psychological, interpersonal, intimate partner violence. It could be gender-based. It could be, even the cognitive. So we have found through our research project, multiple layers within just the lens of violence as well. What we did was we started off with this situational assessment, and what some of the statistics at the time of the assessment that gave us the context for this particular intersectionality was the statistics particularly were around like every 6th day, one woman in Canada is killed by her intimate partner. And at that time, the 3,300 women seek shelter every single day. And these were some of the stats that came from Canadian Women's Foundation. Then we went into the citywide statistics, and we saw that Calgary is experiencing, because we're based in Calgary, so Calgary is experiencing a sharp increase in domestic violence with a 12.8% increase of reported cases between 2015-16, and that a trend that was kind of expected to continue within the Alberta's depressed economy. And now at that time when we started the project, pandemic was not even into the consideration, and this has significantly shown us the impact of huge impact of the pandemic. And at CIWA itself, we're seeing like a 54% increase within the clients accessing services for the domestic violence and are impacted by the employment simultaneously. So this was a perfect timing to really endorse some of the outcomes or findings from this project. The other statistics that were as well is that victims of domestic violence have increased likelihood of being fired or having to quit a job or losing the pay at work. And 1/3 of domestic violence perpetrators contact their victims at work, and 71% of employers and 55% of government employers report a situation where they have to protect an employee who was dealing with violence. So this is why it was very important to look at these statistics. And it also, the statistics shows that 33% of the employed Canadian women reported experiencing domestic violence. So it's a huge percentage. And these are the statistics coming from, some of the government websites or from the government sources, Alberta Council of Women's Shelters. Many employers are simply unprepared to address the issues and do not provide appropriate training. That is also one of the findings that came out through our environmental scan or the situational assessment. Being employed is a pivotal pathway to leaving a violent relationship, and the financial security that employment affords can allow women to escape the isolation of an abusive relationship, because this is typically one of the major reasons why the women who are, or individuals dealing with domestic violence are not leaving the abusive relationship, because they don't want to change the standard of living, both for themselves and particularly when they have their children in the mix. So this was pretty much the overall situational assessment that we came through. And how did we arrive to this? So this was the methodology that we utilized. So it was a threefold approach. First was the focus group, then we did the survey of employers, and then we had the advisory committee. So in the focus groups, who was our participant pool in that focus group? So it had the immigrant women who have themselves experienced domestic violence. We had a mix of service providers, and we had employers. And within the immigrant women, we also tried to have women from various different walks of life. It could be women with low literacy, then language proficiency, women with a high cultural barrier, to the women who had like professional, their job ready, kind of coming with a very high professional experience and education. So it was a very diverse mix of the focus group that we had. And of course, the service providers and employers. And employers also included right from the, survival job type of, or essential work to the corporate work. So that's the kind of mix we had in the focus group. And the survey of employers that we did, again, it included all kinds of employers, and it was conducted in order to understand how the employers currently support women employees who are experiencing domestic violence, especially since we had the Bill 17, that new legislation that came into place. And then lastly, we had the advisory committee, which included a lot of service providers as well, employers, and also 3 women at all times with the lived experience to really get the hands-on, information, what they went through. So based on the situational assessments and all these focus groups, surveys, advisory committees, so this is what the results that we came up with, or at least from the focus group that we did with the immigrant women. So there were a couple of focus groups also we did. So women was separate with the immigrant, newcomer, and refugee women. So this resulted in the findings that immigrant women perceive employment security to be strongly related to the support they could receive from their employers, and they highlighted emotional assistance and feelings within their workplace. So not just the work, but then there is how the emotional stability and support assistance. The other one was the immigrant women who have experienced violence. They feel like they can't disclose their situation to their employer, and that disclosing would jeopardize their employment situation. So that's why they were going through all these issues. They would keep performing badly, but not share with anyone because of the fear of losing the job. The other finding was the immigrant women face similar fears regarding being discriminated and stigmatized, not just in the out in the community, but even within the workplace. So that have actually, that was also a huge thing that came up in this. Lastly, this focus group yielded into like all immigrant women interviewed clearly stated wanting an equal opportunity and access to employment. Their only request was to have support from their employers to comply with job expectations while dealing with the court hearings, childcare restrictions, because even if they decided to flee, these were some of the things that came with that. So the other focus group that we had with the service providers resulted into findings that the service providers understood what the employment security as an employee's rights could be, and that they need to be respected, they need to have a safe and inclusive workplace that understands diversity. So they recognize that it is a need. And then the community serving agencies also mentioned, seeing barriers in regards to cultural and language issues, that women are not being understood, they're being discriminated, they have struggles. And the service providers also said that the social isolation or the little social engagement and having no support network was one of the critical challenges that the immigrant women who they were serving, their experience endorses what the immigrant women were saying. So it was like a cross-referencing of the findings. The service providers also agreed that experiencing the cultural shock and lack of knowledge regarding their rights made immigrant women even more vulnerable and susceptible to to remain in the abusive relationship. So the other online survey that we did with the employers resulted into the findings that 100% of respondents indicated that they felt that the policies regarding the domestic violence are needed, but only one of the main respondents had the policy. So this was very eye-opening for us, that majority of the employers do not have any policies that protect women or individuals dealing with domestic violence. 78% of the respondents reported that they would consider making changes to their current workplace policies and practices. 56% indicated that they have dealt with a domestic violence situation with one of their employees, which was also very eye-opening for us. 78% of the employers indicated that they are aware of the resources available in the community to support women, but they don't know how to access or how to, they have not talked about that in the workplace. 100% of the employers are interested in supporting employees who are experiencing domestic violence, and they understand that they have the legal obligation to do so, and also feel a moral and ethical responsibility, which was very powerful and providing hope that this is going to work. And lastly, the focus group that we had with the employers actually suggested, or the findings from that, is that they understand the employment security as the ability to support and being flexible to the needs of employees as much as possible concerning the job performance requirements. So not just giving them the leave, but then multiple other aspects that they understood that this constitutes to the employment security. Most employers were not aware of the changes to the OHS legislations and how to implement the domestic violence leaves. Employers also wished to help their employees, but did not know how to approach and provide the necessary support, and they felt unprepared to deal with such a complex issue. None of the employers engaged in the discussion and had domestic violence policies or procedures established at their workplace. Lastly, employers indicated a need to have more information about available resources regarding a culturally sensitive approach to domestic violence. So then, based on that, we concluded that the employers are interested in supporting employees who are experiencing domestic violence. They understand that they have a legal and a sense of moral obligation to do so. Employers do experience many challenges in providing support to their employees experiencing domestic violence. The greatest ones, just to summarize, appear to be like knowing if or when an employee is experiencing domestic violence, because if they won't say, employer would not know, but then they wouldn't say. So basically they would, look at the performance, why individual is not performing. So even going beyond the regular performance issues, because there may be something underneath the surface. Obtaining a disclosure from the employee in an appropriate manner when domestic violence is suspected. And then, of course, the lack of policy, the training, and the guide to employer and to guide the employer response. So to conclude, it is likely that these challenges can be well managed with support from the domestic violence and immigrant serving community. So it required like all stakeholders to work together. And based on that, these were some of the possible solutions and recommendations the project came with, that we should provide culturally sensitive, gender-based, and trauma-informed domestic violence policies. We know that the policies needs to be created, but then what does that template look like? And what is the resource for the employers to create those policies? So this project is working on providing those resources, just like, we saw in the health literacy project. It would be very similar to that, we will be having an online resource with the policy templates and all the other resources. And educational programs, training programs for the workplaces, like, engaging during lunch and learn sessions, or employers offering workshops for even the perpetrators, or not the perpetrators, but for everyone at workplace, so that even if someone who is perpetrating violence or going through the violence themselves, they all have the same level of information and access to educational programs. So also one of the recommendation and solution is having a customized bridging program for the vulnerable immigrant women who are going through domestic violence, and they may not be leaving because of these employment security issues. So, we have some bridging programs at CIWA based on not just us, but then working with the focus groups, advisories, and all those. Everyone agreed that this would be a fabulous resource. Lastly, the two things came were the resources for employers, that the online portal that I talked about, and then the amendment of domestic violence leave policy and having additional paid leave days for people who are going through domestic violence. So that brings me to the end of our presentation. And now I will invite Amira Abid, our outreach team member, to share her insights. Amira?
Thank you so much, Reka. That was lovely and a hard act to follow. Thank you very much. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amira Abid. I'm the outreach worker at CIWA. I'll be telling you a little bit about our outreach during the past year, and then we'll be taking questions. So yeah, March 17 was a Tuesday, right in the middle of the week. And that was when we all started working remotely, having gone home the day before with detailed instructions about the continuation of service. And of course, like all of you, no one could envision what the next phase would look like, and we got busy getting used to Microsoft Teams and getting used to Zoom and that kind of thing. For me, the concern was that all my colleagues, our coordinators, our counselors, our staff of more than 200, everybody had their own clients, even if their service delivery mode was going to look different. But for me, my role was that part of communications and marketing that was all about community engagement. So outreach was all about being out there. The presentations we had are at hospitals, the presentations at schools and at community events, driving around with our flyers and dropping them off at hospitals and social workers, um, and chatting with ethnic stores, shop assistants, and chatting with nurses and medical staff. And the networking events we used to attend, like this one here, the Stampede Breakfast, which is a huge time for us here in Calgary. And of course, finding out about community groups, finding out the needs and connecting people to our programs and getting their feedback. And then, of course, there were the community booths, and these were my favorites. So from school nights to outdoor summer festivals to National Day celebrations for different countries, every booth had its own unique feel and its own focus and its own attendees you wanted to network with, and its own programs that you wanted to highlight. And this is about the booths, but back in the office, our team would have regular meetings with our colleagues, with our coordinators, to find out about updates and about details of the programs and all the new projects and everything, so we could take that in detail out to the community. So my role was all about being a good listener and sometimes very talkative. So you can see, I couldn't even begin to imagine what outreach would look like without everything that we were already used to doing. All I could do was scout the news and look for everything that was published about our new reality, what other people were doing, trying to tune into that and take ideas. That was reassuring in a lot of ways, but a lot of the articles were focused about working at home and how to be productive at home, and staying focused, working in your PJs, working out of your PJs, that kind of thing. The next thing I know, it was our busiest time. We were helping around CIWA wherever help was needed. We were dropping off grocery cards, and we were dropping off groceries to senior clients. We were working with emergency response teams that were set up specifically to address major outbreaks. And we were distributing laptops as CIWA supported multivariate clients with laptops and internet connections. Our IT department and our staff worked with our literacy clients. The whole agency pivoted towards remote service delivery. Settlement, our counseling, our group sessions, all the training classes, English classes, our business partners could still secure practicum placements for our staff, for our students and our alumni. Even graduations that were scheduled for the beginning of the transition, they took place as scheduled. And it all did feel very real. And I didn't feel I was only promoting the services and programs of CIWA like I used to. I felt I was supporting and promoting frontliners. We had our settlement staff who were providing immediate needs. We had our counselors. We had our domestic violence team, which was extremely busy. We had a new project that kicked off along with our traditional employment trainings, a project to address short-term contract work and the gig economy. And for the booths, instead of setting up a booth, putting up a flyer like the one I'm always going around with, and exchanging or handling our brochures, our promotions became all over social media, the newsletters, and all over the community groups. And then when all of that started to pick up, we were suddenly getting a lot of response from service providers, from teachers, from social workers. They were connecting us and they were connecting with us about their clients, about a patient, about a new family in school, and getting to know some information before referring that client. And that was the part where we felt there was a new personable element that was coming across, that people were starting to help the community cope and navigate with resources and services. And these were some of our social media posters that were all over for our different, we were very busy. Our social media team was very busy posting over all venues we could access. And this is an example of one of our flyers, just indicating that, yes, we are CIWA, Calgary Immigrant Women's Association, but a lot of our programs cater for the men in the family as well. And then when the relaunch started slowly and cautiously, CIWA was the first immigrant serving agency to reopen the office, and that was the end of June. And we started serving clients in person, remotely, and hybrid. So for the physical booths, as you can see, we did manage a few physical booths at essential venues, like our community food center. We gave out sanitizers at our table. We encouraged people to take a snapshot of the flyers of our programs if they didn't want to pick up a physical copy. And then our first big summer event with masks and with distancing and everything, that was in the middle of the summer, and we had 250 people show up to our booth. In Halloween, we had more than 100 people who stopped at our booth and or in their cars, they drove by in their parade. And if you look at the photos, you will see, of course, everything was handed out with that stick to ensure that everything was remote and through the car windows. As you can see, the giveaways for Halloween were all pre-packed, our resources and our Halloween candy, and everything was as safe as usual as possible. And our interagency work, it expanded its focus from the busy updates and information flow to being channeled into collaborative tables. And these collaborative tables were zooming in on resident-based support. The work was to address urgent needs of specific neighborhoods and specific communities. We also started getting more and more followers on social media. So these are all our social media platforms. So yes, please follow us as well. We're on everything. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. And yes, we all felt that we were in this together and closer as ever, and outreach work kept us just as busy and just as connected as we've always been. And that's it from me. So thank you so very much. And over to you, Celestina.
Thank you, Amira. So thank you everyone for spending this much time with us. I'm going to go straight into the Q&A. I will start off with reading out a question. It's asking about, do you think your strategy for engagement could be used for other topics such as legal assistance for newcomers? So the strategy for engagement, I will use what I had mentioned that we had used when we talked about how we engage different partners to work on our HLP project. And absolutely, I think that can be used for legal assistance for newcomers, because I can use what we do right now as an example, which is how CIWA works in partnership with the Calgary Legal Guardians to provide legal assistance for newcomers in terms of immigration and family law. So the strategy for engagement that we use in HLP is also very similar. In this case, it is a partnership with CLG. CLG provides those needed lawyers who work pro bono and are able to come to CIWA 30 times a week. In the past, we used to have them on Wednesday, first Tuesday of every month, and then subsequent Wednesdays after. Since the pandemic, what we've done is have an online session. So once again, that partnership has proved effective. We send the request online because there's an online virtual platform that has been created. And through that, the lawyer is able to receive the client information and a brief assessment of what the client is speaking about or what the client issue is, and they're able to connect with that client directly to offer services. Where another form of that partnership comes in is in any case where the client will require interpretation, our strong partnership with the CIWA LMB program and also interpreters who are out there, we're able to offer direct interpretation support for that client. So I hope that that answers your question well. I will go to the next question. It says, those videos are excellent. Thank you very much. And the question is, how was the process to develop the resources and how did you choose the topics? The process to develop the resources was, once again, threefold. It didn't have anything to do with just CIWA as an entity. It was a combination of CIWA reaching out to the 3 different participant groups to develop the videos. So the entire, when we did the initial focus group, so the needs assessment for the project itself, one of the things that had been identified was a need for some visual representation for the clients. That was echoed all through the participant groups as we continue to do the focus groups. That's how we thought about videos. Now, to develop the video resources, we had to keep going back and forth with all the participant groups to ensure that we have captured everything that needs to be put in the video in its entirety. So when we developed a resource, for example, I'll use the mammogram video. We could not just write a script on our own and just go ahead and put it into production. We had to take that script back to the radiologist at a mammogram center in Calgary and have that medical expertise, have a pure look at it and tell us if everything that we had spoken about and every topic that we had outlined was correct. So the medical terminology had to be correct. The way it was put in plain language also had to be correct. And then that plain language was sent back to the teachers, the ESL teachers who work with these students to ensure that, yes, my students looking at this will be able to understand. So we had to make sure that that intersectionality of each participant group working to ensure that the project itself was meeting its need as well as being understood by the clients who were going to be the ultimate consumers. So everybody had to be involved. We also went online and we searched for a video maker, somebody who is actually very talented in making videos. So it wasn't just us coming up and making the videos. It had to be actually sourced out, and the videos were done in that regard. I will also just take the next question, which is asking if we hired actors. We actually did use the volunteers in the program as well as some staff. So everybody who is on there is either a staff or a volunteer at CIWA. We didn't use clients in the videos. How did we choose the topics? When we did our focus group, there was an overarching theme that we kept noticing. So we had to actually go into thematic units and then pick what each one was actually addressing. So that's how the topics came about. If they were addressing a need to be able to find an interpreter, note cards were developed. So everything was developed based on the themes that were identified as we went along. And the last question, second to the last question, how often, okay. Did we make the videos in several languages? Yes, we made the videos in several languages. So the scripts were translated into 7 different languages, and they were the top languages that the participant group spoke, as well as the top 5 languages of Newcomers are also in that video, as well as the top 7 languages that those participant groups actually spoke. So that's why the videos are in those languages. Feel free to go online to check them out. I will hand over to Reka right now because I think I've addressed all my questions because we have very limited time left. And the question is, how often do employers and colleagues know how to recognize gender-based violence and how to help?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. It's a great one. And that did come up in our discussions as well during the projects. So multiple employers said that they would not know. They would wait for the employee to tell us that, there is some domestic violence issue going on. But then based on some of the feedback from also employers that it would be good for us to know. Some employers did, like for example, one employer shared that there was this chatty employee, but there are days when she is quiet or she is not engaged, and sometimes her performance is good, sometimes her performance goes down. So we don't understand that it is the same person, having different levels of performances. So that was a sign to look into, and the supervisor asked, some pointed questions and then dug out that, oh, there is some serious domestic violence issues going on with this individual. So based on that, we have also created a ton of videos, just like, the Celestina, my colleague, alluded to. So we will be making, we are not sharing that resource right now on the screen because it will be going live in 2 weeks, but we have made exactly similar ways of, videos like how to identify and what are the resources, what to do, how to create that conversation, what are some of the safety things that we need to, how do you provide that safety, and, what is abuse basically to begin with. So those are some of the kind of resources and the videos that will also be put on that online portal. And that will also be translated in multiple languages as well. Some of them are already out there on our regular website, but they will all be put into this portal as well.
Thank you so very much, Reka. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. I want to just use this opportunity once again to thank my colleagues for joining me on this presentation and for, despite the fact we had a couple of technical challenges, this is the new world we live in. So we thank you all for bearing with us. And thank you again. Please feel free to reach out to any one of us All our information are on the presentation itself, and you can find that once again on the P2P virtual platform. We're all here to answer your questions, email, whatever, we're available. Thank you once again so much for everything.